This morning, I'm going to be reading from Luke chapter 10, verses 25 to 37, and this is coming from the New Living Translation. One day, an expert in religious law stood up to test Jesus by asking him this question: "Teacher, what should I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus replied, "What does the law of Moses say? How do you read it?" The man answered, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength, and all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." "Right," Jesus told him. "Do this, and you will live." The man wanted to justify his actions, so he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied with a story. A Jewish man was traveling from Jerusalem down to Jericho, and he was attacked by bandits. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and left him half dead beside the road. By chance, a priest came along. But when he saw the man lying there, he crossed to the other side of the road and passed him. A temple assistant walked over and looked at him lying there, but he also passed by on the other side. Then a despised Samaritan came along, and when he saw the man, he felt compassion for him. Going over to him, the Samaritan soothed his wounds with olive oil and wine and bandaged them. Then he put the man on his own donkey and took him to an inn where he took care of him. The next day, he handed the innkeeper 2 silver coins, telling him, "Take care of him. If his bill runs higher than this, I'll pay you the next time I'm here." Now, which of these 3 would you say was a neighbor to the man who was attacked by the bandits? Jesus asked. The man replied, "The one who showed him mercy." Then Jesus said, "Yes, now go and do the same."
Good morning, Trinity. My name is Daniel. I'm a member here. And I'm very grateful to be talking to a Mennonite audience, of course, about the Good Samaritan. It's a little bit like speaking to the Pentecostal church I went to about John 3:16. This is something you've heard nonstop for years, and you've probably heard it preached better than this, and a lot of you could recount the story almost verbatim. Megan Good could obviously preach this in her sleep. But I want to talk today about what it means to actually rehumanize your neighbor. Let's go to the first slide. What do you think of when you think of a dandelion? It's bright, yellow, weed. Who said what else? Wheat. Good in gravy? What? Oh, wow, okay, all right. Didn't know that. I'm from Glendale, so we don't do that where I'm from. Apparently, like a lot of you pointed out, it is edible. Pollination, it's good for everybody, as you could see from the photo. Depends on your perspective, I guess, on what it's good for. Its roots have been used for millennia medicinally, and its flower, obviously, is beautiful and it's edible. And I hesitate to say this because apparently its leaves can be used to make a good salad. And I hesitate to say that because now Alicia Garber is going to bring a dandelion salad to our next life group potluck. And kids, of course, don't love them for any of that. They love them for the fact that they get to blow their wishes out into the universe with them. A few weeks ago, I was on a walk with our kids around our neighborhood. And we came across a dandelion in a neighbor's yard. And without even thinking, I just reached down and I picked it. But because I'm a very good neighbor, I picked it up by its roots, pulled it all the way out. And then I snapped off the flower, threw the roots, and I was like, oh, I did another good deed today. Rack it up, Daniel. But our daughter Zoe, who is an attentive listener and probably the most literal of our kids, she said, "I shouldn't have done that. Dad, when you pick that, it's a beautiful flower. You should just let it be. Like you said, leave it alone so it can still keep being beautiful. And like any loving father, I responded, first of all, never use my words against me, kid. And second of all, this flower is a weed here. I'm helping our neighbor by picking it. Otherwise, it's going to choke out the grass. And she said, but if you didn't pick it, he might have a yard full of flowers. Don't worry, I explained to her. Our culture likes well-manicured lawns, level fields, thick grass. But on the walk home, I thought, how long until Zoe sees dandelions as a weed? And how does that happen? How long until she sees it as a weed first and then a flower? What changes is the cultural norm that we have creates a very specific and small label for us, and that's what we're talking about this morning. It's a weed, it's unwanted, invasive, it's out of place, and nothing changes about the flower. The only thing that changes is we grow up and it becomes less useful to us. But I want to sit today with the fact that labels, when we are going around in our lives, they often end up preceding our seeing. They replace our seeing. We don't see flowers that are invasive, we just see weeds. And we do this all over the place. And it's probably understandable for suburban dandelions. But the ways that it starts to impact other aspects of our life, as we'll find out, really have significant consequences. So we inherit labels. Next slide, please. We inherit labels, norms, and values from our culture, family, religion, our workplace, our music, our friend group, all day, every day, through 3-second Facebook reels and lengthy New York Times pieces, and of course, our prime time monologues. And these labels are incredibly powerful. Biologically, they're really powerful to us because we're looking for security in who we are and also, to identify threats very quickly. I'm grateful for labels. If I ran into a mountain lion, I would know, don't go kiss that thing on the mouth. That's a very dangerous thing. I don't need to feel it out and get to know it. But the slippery slope of this happens very quickly and we don't notice. And I want to suggest that one of the most powerful things a label can do isn't just describe things. It prescribes our understanding of the subject. And so when we're talking about Luke 10, and I did just realize while listening to Liz speak, that Kurt must feel especially called out today, because not only am I picking on lawyers, I also took his parking spot. Didn't see your name there, Kurt. But this lawyer in a theocracy, in an established religious system, is a very significant person. He's accomplished, he's seen widely as, capable, intelligent, understands what we're about. He understands all the labels and how they work together. And so when he tries to trick Jesus, of course, he tries to trick him on the legality of things. And Jesus just gives him the answer you want. Of course, here it is. Can you answer it? Oh, good, look at that. Okay, you could do it too. Great. But the man all of a sudden wants, how do I know that you think I'm in? Even you, right? He wants another checklist. He wants another set of rules. And of course, you can hear his status coming out. He's not worried about goodness or what beauty actually is. He's worried about justifying himself, like the text calls out. Now, I would say if the text didn't say he was trying to justify himself, I would think it's a pretty reasonable question. Like, okay, well, who is my neighbor then? Could you just lay it out for me? I just want it to be pretty plain and simple. But Jesus doesn't answer inside of that system. He answers with a story. And instead of more rules, Jesus does this very complex, ambiguous, frustrating thing of giving the lawyer a role in a story. So the mechanics of how these labels work are, they feel very complex, but the whole purpose, next slide please, is that they don't seem to exist. I think we went too far. Oh. Just imagine there's like circles, and then they get smaller and smaller. And then also, I think Chris probably did this intentionally because that's also where like the most controversial labels are. What are the labels that we see other people with? What are the labels that we see ourselves with? They're political, right? Left? I meant right, correct, but it works still. Right, left, up, down, center. Everybody's a centrist, by the way. Everybody else is an extremist. We've got woke people. We've got deplorable people. We have high school dropouts. We've got failures. We have success stories and doctors. We have the in crowd. We have the out crowd. We have immigrants. We have refugees. We have direct reports, right? We have bosses. And we have bussers and servers and cooks. And all of these things start to compile on us somebody's value. And we wouldn't say this explicitly, right? Because we're all decent people. Just like the lawyer in this story. Over time, our circles become smaller and smaller and smaller. Think about this. We're Christians. And are Catholics Christians? Well, maybe, maybe not. Okay, are Reformed Christians? Well, they're not true Christians. What about, and all of a sudden, we go so small that it's pretty much just us in that circle. And over time, as they get, smaller, we continue to ask more clarifying questions. But you'll notice the lawyer isn't the only prestigious person in this story. The Levite and the priest were both born into national and theological significance. They are like the creme de la creme. And they're very important, busy people. They probably have families and sermons to get to and obviously sacrifices and all kinds of things. But the way that this works is these systems give us excuses to not do our human part with our neighbor. Because you are a very important person. You do have a lot to do, and it's good stuff. And I mean, those dandelions aren't going to water themselves. I want to share, just before this story, the disciples had gotten authority from Jesus to go out into the world, and they cast out demons, and they healed people, and it was crazy. And then Jesus said, okay, now go into a town and ask for a place to stay. And so they did. And it was a town that was a Samaritan town. Now, Samaritans are religiously adjacent to the Jewish people. They're really not that different, but, in a small circle, this little label becomes everything. And so what happens? They go into this town. The Samaritans say, oh, no, we don't have any room. Sorry, you guys can't stay here. And the disciples come back to Jesus and they say, all right, Jesus, I'm going to call fire down and burn that whole town, right? And Jesus is like, dude, I just gave you one thing to do. Just chill. And so the next story, right? Jesus starts off with, who is my neighbor? But then a Samaritan came. And you can feel Peter do the face palm. Samaritans, he's calling me out right here, right in front of my friends. But these different labels, we start to assume, we start to project, and we start to understand the conclusion before things actually even happen. And I want to give you an example of the way that the systems work. So here's the theory. Systems give you labels, they give you purpose, they give you an identity inside of the system, and then we can use these labels now to find our purpose or find excuses not to do certain things, and it all ends up being abstract at the cost of the concrete of the person in front of us. Julian and I were on a big Dave Ramsey kick for a while, and we were moving from Boston back to Phoenix, and so we discovered his podcast, and we were listening to it nonstop until we hit this one radio show episode he had. In this episode, one of his followers called in and said, he was talking about an investment property that he had. And this was not a rich person. This person had one investment property. Again, rich is a pretty relative term here. But they had one extra property that they were renting out. And they called and they asked, is it okay morally to evict this person? Dave Ramsey, of course, thinks it's like a totally ludicrous question. He says, the tenant hasn't upheld their end of the bargain. You guys signed a contract. The law is very clear here. The law is the law. And the caller starts to struggle, really struggling. It gets really awkward and tense. And finally, Dave Ramsey said, look, I'll tell you what I think. If I stood in front of Jesus and he asked me why I evicted that person, I would tell him plainly, I didn't evict that tenant, the market did. Who is Mr. Market? I really want to meet this guy because I, first of all, have a few bones to pick with him. And so this is how it works. I'm sitting in my car on the freeway exit. What can I do? This isn't my problem. They probably deserve this somehow. All these things, and it doesn't happen every time. It only happens the times that I start to feel a little bit guilty. Now, the system absolves us of our responsibility in exchange for completely neutering us of our power. What can I do? It sounds kind of humble. Like, what can I do? And it makes me sound powerless. But all you have to do is nothing. And isn't that wonderful for the system to continue? Jesus reveals the heart of God, though, shown through the prophetic tradition. Next slide, please. Where we see here a quote from Abraham Joshua Heschel. To us, a single act of injustice, cheating in business, exploitation of the poor, is a slight. To the prophets, a disaster. To us, injustice is injurious to the welfare of the people. To the prophets, it's a moral death blow to existence. To us, an episode. To them, a catastrophe, a threat to the world. The incapacity to sense the depth of misery caused by our own failures, our own actions or inactions, is a fact which no subterfuge can elude. That's no excuse can get rid of. Our eyes are witness to the callousness and cruelty of man, but our heart tries to obliterate these memories, to calm the nerves, and to silence our conscience. Obviously, that's a pretty heavy-hitting quote, but in short, what it means is we have all kinds of mechanisms that protect us from the evil that we know happens right next to us and right around us, and it becomes so overwhelming that it's easier just to be like, okay, shh. I remember Megan preaching a long time ago about The Good Place. And if you haven't seen that show, there's this concept of when you die, how many points did you add up, and did it outweigh how many negative points you had with your actions? And they go through seasons and seasons of this. It's very hilarious. And of course, the main character is from Tempe, most sinful place on earth. Probably. I don't know. And what ends up happening is one person who has seen the actual hell space understands you have to do all these good things. And they go visit him. And he is extremely neurotic. He can't buy this shirt because it was probably made in Thailand. And he can't do this because he can't eat this food because it was probably grown with pesticides. And he goes. And we want to break from that. I do not want to be aware of all the things that I do that could possibly hurt somebody else. But when Jesus comes and asks us, which of these was your neighbor in this story, right? The question isn't who, try to calculate it out. It's a pretty obvious, straightforward answer. How much has the system done outside of our labels to deserve what we give it? The prophets here would say, if it doesn't work for one person, it doesn't work. If it works for the vast majority of people, but it doesn't work for a whole neighborhood, a whole people group, if it doesn't work for one family or one person, it doesn't work. Now, of course, Josh thinks you should go burn it down. Burn down the whole system. I'm not going to say he's right or wrong, but it's interesting. But what we can do is start to unravel this piece by piece. Again, this Samaritan had more and better excuses than anybody not to do anything. He was not only an other, his people were likely ostracized or even slightly oppressed by the people of the man who was robbed. He was different over just a small disagreement, and then he was pushed all the way to the side. But there's nothing more destabilizing to a system that you can't see and that prefers not to be named than to treat people as if they don't deserve to be treated by this system. We've heard concepts, I know a lot of you talk about the upside down kingdom, valuing people who are generally at the bottom, on the margins, bringing them into the center. But also, one thing we don't do very well is rehumanize ourselves. What are the labels that we live by? What are the negative things that you carry, that I carry, that are based on my inadequacies and my insufficiencies and how I haven't accomplished and all the things I haven't done? So how do we rehumanize somebody? We start with ourselves. G.K. Chesterton, seen here after a failed experiment trying to turn himself into a kite, says, "But we have to love our neighbor because he is there, a much more alarming reason for a much more serious operation. He is the sample of humanity which is actually given us. The fact that he is enough and is the entire point. The fact that our neighbor is a human reflects the exact human condition that we have. And I would take it a step further and say the fact that our neighbor is on the streets or is fleeing domestic violence or is coping and addicted, that is an alarming reason enough." And now, I don't want to get into too much of exactly like, let's fight the system, empower the people, this kind of stuff. Because I don't think, that's participating in a system itself, protesting, voting, all these things, you're in this system. I'm saying to just take a step outside of all of this. And the person right in front of you is the person to be a neighbor for. And so what does this look like? Next slide, please. Lieutenant Colonel Mervyn Willett Gonin, never going to say that again, was among the first British soldiers to liberate Bergen-Belsen concentration camp in 1945. Next slide, please. He kept a diary, and in it he described something strange that happened. He said after they were liberating the camp, the British Red Cross showed up, and he doesn't know if that's related or not, but all of a sudden this shipment of lipsticks showed up. He says, "This was not at all what we wanted. We were screaming for hundreds and thousands of other things, and I don't know who asked for lipstick, or honestly, like where they got that amount of lipstick. I wish so much I could discover who did it. It was the action of genius, sheer unadulterated brilliance. I believe nothing did more for these internees than the lipstick. At last, someone had done something to make them individuals again. They were someone, no longer merely the number tattooed on their arm. That lipstick started to give them back their humanity. The men wanted medicine, food, clothes, obviously. But nothing could defeat a system and rehumanize those people, even in the midst of their own liberation, physical liberation, than to have their humanity restored." Now, we're not liberating a concentration camp. I want to say there's some limitations here, obviously. But when we drive by these labels, seeing people as a number or as, the product of their own choices or whatever it is the limiting factor not only of their humanity but of ours. And so that brings me to, next slide please, something that the local mission task force is launching today. Yeah, that picture doesn't look as cool when it's that big, actually. Okay, good to know. But we are starting something that is very small and likely will not destroy the entire system. But it can rehumanize our neighbors, and it can rehumanize us. Chris talks all the time about this sozo concept of salvation, that you don't go get saved, you're made whole, you're healed, you're put back into rightness. And so we invite you today during the patio hour, come to the furthest kids' room, the end of the children's building, children's ministry building. It probably has a better name than and fill up a bag with just basic resources for somebody. And when you're driving, you're on your commute, you get stuck at traffic, you're dropping the kids off, you're doing Pilates, I don't know, whatever you drive to, stop and see that person for a second. And you don't have to do anything else. Offer them a bag. And one of our unhoused neighbors once told me that the worst part of asking for help on the streets is not that people don't give you anything. It's that they won't even look you in the eye. And so take this bag, fill it up. This is just an example. I'm not doing this all for you, Corey. You have to go in there, pick the stuff out, put it in there. You have to do something. And then hand it out. Ask, what's your name? Are you from Phoenix? Just something basic. Share your name. And then, of course, the light's going to turn green and off you go. And then the next week, come back. Fill the bag and go find that same person. We're just asking that everybody take one person that they run into with one name and one story and one life. Now, if you disagree with anything I have said so far, I have good news for you. We'll go out here in a minute and we'll do our patio time of conversation, and then at 11 o'clock you can rejoin us and we'll do what we call double take, where you all get to grill me for why I made you sit through this for so long and also disagree with it, and we'll unpack it together. And I want to explore more in that time about how we rehumanize ourselves, especially in a safe context of community. And so the final slide here. What is this little bag going to matter? What is one blanket that somebody uses for a few nights and then it gets hot and then they throw it away? Or what if they use the money for drugs? All of this will not tear down the system, but it can produce cracks in the way that we see things. It can start to make us question a little bit of the labels that we see, and that is the beginning of a system. I want you to know that the system we have built has been made through years and years of small, consistent choices. And we can build a new one. And when it's fully bloomed, Jesus calls this the kingdom of God, which is here. One last quick story, actually. I'm going to throw something out. Sorry. I spoke at the kids' camp 7 years ago or so. And there was one kid who especially was on the outside for most things. This person was a little awkward and not very normal in quite a few ways. I'm not talking about myself. And the very last lesson that we had, we decided to play some dance music. And that person kind of got on stage and just started shaking it. And I was like, okay, go off. Great, good for you. And all of a sudden, her sister came up. The next person came up. All the kids were on stage, just dancing. And nothing really seemed to matter. There was no inside or outside. There were no lines. There was no oh, now she's celebrating. No, they were all just being kids together. Let's pray. Jesus, thank you for being patient with us and being kind to us. Not telling us exactly how to live, but giving us the chance to be human by telling us a story and giving us a central role in it. We thank you for our neighbors, and we thank you for your presence with us along this journey.